Hey everyone, so for today's video, we'll install a pair of Bilstein B6 monotube struts, as well as replace the RSR lowering springs in my 2015 Lexus NX 200T with the factory springs. This one has adaptive suspension, so I'll also show you guys how to delete that properly. I've actually done this before, so rest assured that everything that you'll see here today is completely reversible. I've owned this Lexus NX since it was brand new, and throughout that time, it has lived most of its life with an ECU tune and has had a ton of suspension mods. I'll probably do a follow-up video about all the things I did to this vehicle, but for today, this is the job. And this is the part number for the left strut, and this is the part number for the right one. And I'd like to point out that both of these struts are marketed for Toyota RAV4s. Everything that you see on this video today will also be applicable to the 2006 to 2012 and 2013 to 2018 Toyota RAV4s, since they share a similar platform with the 2015 to 2021 Lexus NX. The steps would also be applicable to the 2013 to 2018 Toyota Harriers in the Asian markets. I'm gonna come up with a follow-up video later on why I paired these Bilstein B6 monotube struts with the factory springs instead of the RSR lowering springs currently installed in the Lexus NX. But for now, let's focus on the task at hand. Now before lifting the car up, you'd want to loosen these three strut nuts a little with a 14mm socket, or a close wrench in that case. Remove this cap, and also loosen this 19mm strut nut. You're not going to take them off completely just yet. You're just getting them started so you don't have a hard time later when the car's up in the air. If you're watching this video, I assume you already know how to safely lift the car up and remove the wheels. But I'd just like to point out that there's this quick access lift point in the front center of the vehicle that allows you to quickly lift both sides of the front at the same time and slide the jack stands underneath each of the corner pinch welds. Once you have the car up in the air, don't forget to slide jack stands underneath the corner jack points. You can see that I've added some pinch weld protectors over here. Those are for the 05 to 2018 Ford Mustangs and they fit light Toyota vehicles perfectly. Once you have the car up in the air and on jack stands, you can start loosening the different nuts and screws that you need to take off for today's job. First off is this 12mm bolt holding the brake hose clamp down. Now everything I'm showing you here right now is for the left side, but the steps for the right side are the same. Once you have that bolt off, move everything out of the way. So it's going to be two brackets here. First one holds the ABS lines, and the second thicker one holds the brake hose. Slide that out of the way. There you go. Next up is this plug that goes into the adaptive suspension motor. So to take it off, you insert a flat screwdriver from the bottom, lift the clip up, slide it off. We won't be reinstalling this today. I'll show you guys later how to properly seal it and delete AVS. Once you have that off, remove the rubber grommets that are clipped onto the strut base. And move it out of the way. Next step is to remove this nut on the stabilizer link. Now you're going to use a super extended 17mm socket for that to avoid hitting the bumper when you work it with the breaker bar. Once the nut's loose, take it off. Get this out of the way and reinstall the nut. Once that's done, you can start breaking the camber bolts loose with a 22mm socket, countered by a 22mm wrench on the other side. Do the same for the other bolt. Once that's done, remove the nuts, but don't remove the bolts just yet. You'll notice that I'll flip these bolts around later for easier tightening. It's kind of hard to maneuver with the way they came from the factory. So right now, the whole strut assembly is being held on by these two camber bolts. And what we're going to do right now is push the lower control arm up a little from the bottom so that we can completely remove the 3 strut mount nuts that we loosened earlier up there. So let's go do that. You can stop when you start to see the spring compressing a little, and carry on removing the 3 strut mount nuts. Start with the innermost one. That's the one that's always at risk of falling into the cowl, so be very careful about this. Once you have it loose, remove your gloves and proceed with carefully removing this nut. Sometimes you gotta get into weird positions just to gain access to it, but you'd rather do that than drop it into the cowl. There you go. The remaining 2 nuts should be easier. Still use your box wrench for this one. Again, these nuts are 14 millimeters. Second one. Third one. I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to show you guys, but what we're gonna do right now is that as we slowly lower the lower control arm right here, the strut should slowly lower with it as well, since we already removed the nuts from above. And once that clears enough, I'm gonna grab these camber bolts off so we can remove the strut assembly completely. Let's do that. Once you have the strut out of the vehicle, raise the lower control arm just enough so that you don't yank the inner drive shaft out of the transmission. It's nothing serious, I've done it a few times, just annoying and a little difficult to get back in place. Right, now onto the struts. You'd want to use a spring compressor tool with safety pins like I'm using right here. You can see that there's absolutely no way that the spring would accidentally fly out of the clamps. So once you have everything securely prepped up, it's time to compress the spring. Once you see that the spring or the spring insulator is really able to wobble about, you can go ahead and remove this 19mm strut mount nut that we loosened earlier. Once you have the nut and the strut mount off, slowly slide the strut out of the spring. Ah yes, don't forget to remove the strut bearing as well. On RAV4s, this is probably going to be 2 separate pieces, but on the NX, it's just 1 piece. You can disregard these bump stops right here. This was from a custom bump stop stack that I did a few months ago. We'll be replacing them today. And once you've completely removed everything, go ahead and loosen this all the way so you don't have a ticking time bomb in your workplace. Don't forget to remove the spring isolator. We're going to transfer it to the new strut. While both front springs for the Lexus NX are of the same part number, they are not manufactured perfectly identical. In my case here, one was ever so slightly longer than the other. You'd want the longer one to go to the left front strut, since both the battery and the fuel tank are mounted on the left side of the vehicle. I'm not sure how it'll be with the RAV4 or the Toyota Harrier, but that's how it is on the Lexus NX. The factory spring on the Lexus NX is much longer than the RSR springs. So you'd have to start this tool out a little wider and compress it all the way in just to be able to install the front strut properly. I arranged this in the order that you'll be installing them. So you start with the strut, you slide the spring insulator in. Obviously without that nut, we're not going to use this. We're going to use a factory nut. The one that Bilstein supplies with this is a bigger 22mm one. We don't want to use that. Take this off as well. We don't need this as well. Okay. So after the spring insulator, you slide the bump stop in. This is a totally new part. Next, you slide the whole strut assembly in here like this. Slide this on top and through the shaft. Top it off with this strut mount. Finally, put this color in there before sealing it with the nut. This goes on top of the strut mount, not under it. Don't repeat the same mistake that I did when I did this for the first time ever a few years ago. For today's project, on top of this brand new factory bump stop, I'm gonna use a part of the old factory bump stop for additional stiffness. It's gonna be positioned so when I slide it down the strut shaft. So you can see that the spring insulator and the bump stops are in, and we're ready to slide this through the spring. Once you tighten the strut nut enough and feel like you hit a wall, you can go ahead and release the entire spring compressor. Now before we put everything back together, don't forget to reinstall this metal gasket right here. I moved the front knuckle out of the way and you can see the strut holes up there. So the idea, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to show you guys on camera, is to approach the strut holes from this angle and holding the spring with one hand, quickly install the strut nut with the other up there. I also like this notch to be facing the side mirror whenever I install struts, but frankly it doesn't really matter. Once you have at least 2 strut nuts started, you can go ahead and lower the lower control arm. That'll allow you to slide the knuckle into place, slide both camber bolts in, and once again raise the lower control arm so you can properly tighten the 3 strut nuts up there. Once you have the jack pushing up on the lower control arm and the strut mount firmly pressed against the strut tower, go ahead and tighten the strut nuts. You don't have to do the final torque on them just yet. We'll do that later when the car's down on the ground. Carefully install this one. You have to be absolutely sure you have the nuts started before you let go. Now that we have the 3 strut bolts nice and tight up there, we can go ahead and lower this control arm and start tightening our bolts. So as I mentioned earlier, I flipped the bolts around Doesn't really matter, thickness is same all the way, just for easier access from here. And you can see some nasty marks over here. That's because I used to use camber adjustment balls before I moved on to the hard raised camber curve correctors. I'll talk about those in a future video. And before we torque that down, let's mount the brake hose first, as well as the ABS sensor wire clip. So you do this, I'll show you guys. So you do this by sliding this in first. And once it's in its slot, put this over it. It's going to be a little loose, and that's because ABS wire clamp is designed to hook from above and clamp down on the brake hose clamp once you tighten this bolt. You'll also notice that this Bilstein strut doesn't have any provision to hold the ABS wires. And that's because the RAV4 doesn't have ABS to start with. I'll also show you guys in a bit how to tuck this in and seal it properly. And like I said, I've done the same job before. I've had this Bilstein strut installed here before. Everything you're about to see is completely reversible. Once that's done, we can tighten the camber bolts further before bringing out the torque wrench. Now to torque it down, I'm not sure if you guys can see it clearly here, but we set the torque wrench to 176 foot-pounds. That's factory spec. Last of the bolts and nuts on here, get the stabilizer link back in this hole. Tighten and torque it to 55 foot-pounds. To seal the ABS plug, you'll need one of these 1-inch heat shrink caps, preferably with glue inside. Slide the plug in until it's about this deep, so the base is until here. And start working on shrinking this heat shrink. Stay as far away as you can from the brake lines. While it's still kinda warm, work your pliers like so. Make the molten glue in there stick to each other. Hold it on like that for a little while you wait for it to cool down. So we've now fully waterproofed the factory ABS plug. The important part to protect is somewhere in the middle. And by heating up this heat shrink cap, the glue has spread where it needs to seal. We have this entire lower half to act as water runoff in case some water splashes in here. But as you can see, by clamping it down while waiting for the heat shrink cap to cool down, we've been able to make the glue down there work in our favor. And as long as we mount this newly sealed cap like so, any water that happens to splash up there will just run off straight back down. Now it's time to mount this thing. Before we do that, I thought I'd show you guys what it looks like after heating it up some more. The heat shrink cap definitely hugs the plug better now. And here's the final result. Now the way I routed this wire, it closely follows the factory ABS wire, and Toyota has probably determined this to be the safest way a wire can pass here. I first routed it in here, looped around, put the cable tie here just so that it never touches the brake line, looped it out back over here. You can see that this plastic piece also serves as a stopper so it never goes here. Curve the wire like so. Move the rubber grommet a little forward here so I can use a cable tie over the ABS wire bracket. And finally, I tied down the seal plug over here. So you can see with the way this is arranged, any water that happens to splash up will just go straight back down. Again, like I said earlier, completely reversible. So now we've finished this left side, we'll do everything we just did to the right side and bring the car back down. Once you have your car back on the ground, don't forget to torque these 3 strut nuts to 37 foot-pounds and this big one to 44 foot-pounds, after which, get your car aligned. Oh, and don't forget to put this lid rubber cap back on. I'll probably do a follow-up video talking about how this new setup drives, so please do consider subscribing so you don't miss that. Thank you for staying till the end. See you next time.